Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is November 16, 2021. We want to thank the amazing and great Rob Grant, bound to be in some Monty film in the future.
Wouldn't that be nice? Take
Wouldn't that
care,
be?
guys.
And Rob, thanks for all your help.
Thank you.
And
Jerry.
Monty, pronounce your last name so we get it right.
Rowan, Rowan.
Monty Rowan, it's such a pleasure and honor to be here. Where are you calling from?
Somewhere close to the water, Jerry.
I like that. Me too. And so, first question, Monty, is what's the best thing for a human being?
Love.
I love that answer. I get that often. What's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
Music. Film.
Music, film. What was it?
And poetry.
Wow, that's pretty heavy, dude. And so why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Why do I say that again, Jerry?
Why do humans collect or gather information?
I think they do it to connect with one another.
Yeah. Do you think this need or tendency or want to gather information is more innate or more invented?
Poof. That's a good question, Jerry. Innate or invented? Well, it's a combination of both. I mean, it's the innate part is part. It's built into us genetically. It's built into our DNA too. But what was the other part of the question, Jerry?
Well, is it more innate or more invented? Now you said both, and that's good. And I'll tell you right off the bat, this woman I interviewed the other day, she goes, the word more doesn't function in that question. It was like, I know
that's a good answer.
That is a good answer, but I know it's both. And I know it depends. But I don't really want you to favor one or the other. It's just a jumping off point for discussion. But it is, you wonder because we're innate to say eat food. But we invented ways of eating food and all this. So it's a fine line. But there are breatharians, supposedly. So how can you prove we're innate to eat food?
I like that. Well, I like the inventive part of food too. I love to cook, and I love the whole idea of our creative energy being a part of that formula.
Yeah, it's like because humans want to think we have done something beyond how we were destined to be by whatever you say.
Exactly.
So, do thoughts create emotions?
Well, that's a good one too. But I've been working on a film about Antonio DiMaggio, and who is cutting the cutting edge of neuroscience, and he says clearly and has proven clearly scientifically that it starts with emotion, and thought grows out of emotion. It's not the other way around as we have presumed for a couple of centuries.
That is heavy, dude. So
it's not the Cartesian model. I think, therefore I am. It's I feel, I think, therefore I am. And Jerry, even further to that, I'd like to just say that as an artist, that we've always known that. Artists have always known that.
Yeah.
It starts with intuition. It starts with feeling, and then you can get intellectual about it if you want.
Right. But it's amazing. When did he come up with that about? Do you know? Like what?
Very recently. It's very current work that he's doing right now. He is at USC, and he is considered to be right on the cutting edge of neuroscience, especially in this arena, emotion and thought and creativity. Those are the areas he's really interested in.
And a phenomenon here, Bonnie, is that humans invented the word feeling and they invented the word thinking, and you can't really separate them. but we think we can because we invented the words.
Yeah,
see,
the words help us to separate a lot of things, Jerry.
But yeah, they help us to separate a lot of things, but then they don't help us because we're like T.S. Eliot said, the great poet, when I talk to you, I got to use words. So this is you
Did T.S. Eliot say that?
yeah, you have the ESP because you've led right into our topic here. Is thinking more innate or more invented?
Thinking.
Yeah.
Thinking? Well, I would have to say that thinking is more innate. My feeling is that.
More innate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fill in.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, just because we just came from that series of thoughts where we were talking about whether thinking or thoughts arise from feeling, or do feelings arise from thoughts, and and I really, now that I've read a lot of DiMaggio, but also and analyzed it with respect to my own work, that I really feel that it begins with embodied emotion, and emotion leads the way.
Yeah. I don't know what I think until I fill in the blank.
Well, if I was T.S. Eliot, I'd say until I write it down, right? Maybe. um, hmm. I guess I have to feel like the thought needs to be manifested in some way.
I don't know what I think until I manifest it. Is that what you'd
Yeah,
say?
yeah,
Guess what?
yeah. I
I
mean,
got
Jerry,
go
I
ahead.
meant to. So there's many ways of manifesting your thought. So through language, or through visual art, or through music, right? So
No,
anyhow,
I love the
sorry.
word manifest because McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. And Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it down.
Yeah, well,
But
I
being an
agree with
image,
both of them, Jerry.
yeah, well, being an image guy, I have to tell you one more. This is funny because this starts my book with this quote by let's see, who is it? It's a guy that Walter Benjamin wanted to quote. I can no longer think what I want to think. My thoughts have been replaced by moving images.
Yeah, I recognize that quote. That's a
Yeah,
beauty.
George Duhamel, Duhamel. So it's like you go, I had this dream last night. It was like Hitchcock's Spellbound, and we can't describe our dreams with words, first of all, but we think we can. But it's a lot easier when you have a whole history of cinema to go. It was like this movie, then it was like this
Yeah.
painting.
Yeah, we try and do that a lot in my business to communicate. Most of us are pretty poor with words.
Can humans think without language?
Yes, most assuredly. They can think. They can think with feelings.
Yeah.
Feelings first, and then thoughts.
Amazing. Chomsky said language is not just words, it's culture, tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is.
Hmm.
Monica, what do you do when language doesn't work, when it breaks down?
Well, that we're kind of in that time right now, where we need to redefine a lot of the words that we use in our language, in our society, in our culture, in our community, so that we can start to reconnect with one another, again, in more human, more feeling ways than we are now living in a world where we get more and more disconnected, unfortunately. And a lot of the devices, not this one, Jerry, but a lot of what we are using, the internet, cell phones, and all those things are strong contributing factors to that disconnectedness.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be unified. They're supposed to be connecting us, Jerry, but they're doing the opposite.
Yeah. Well, that's making a value judgment on our tools, and I appreciate that, because basically what we're on right now is live TV. This is like the 50s, dude. We don't need no studio. We don't need Elia Kazan and be in New York with
I
these
love
big
this.
clunky theaters. I mean, the big clunky cameras. Being a camera operator, now look at this. This little tiny green dot has all the technology we need, and all we do is hit a button, and we're live, reaching the entire world, live TV.
That's sadly true, Jerry.
Yeah, you're out of a job because those motherfuckers.
That little bugger can do it all by himself. That little green dot.
Okay. Yeah, this you've sort of answered, but I'm going to ask it anyways.
Sure.
Your observations of humans, are humans more feeling beings or more thinking beings? I know it's both and it depends, but just
no, but I feel very strongly that they're much more feeling beings than thinking beings.
Yeah.
They, of course, thought is, an essential part of being human, but I don't think that we acknowledge enough how much we are feeling beings, and that's really where that's the engine that drives the machine.
Really perfect lead in. You got double ESP. Alan Turing, 1950. 2 Alan Turing questions. Is thinking a function of the soul?
Well, again, I've heard that question, so what is the soul, Jerry? That's a long discussion, and we really shouldn't even begin to try. So that's it. The unfair question, I beg, because it begs a lot of definitions that we haven't gotten to yet. But if we want to start, we could start on soul and see if that's whatever that is, the fiber, the fabric that connects us. Maybe it's a connection to God, whatever kind of God it is you believe in. I'm a pretty poor Buddhist, to be honest with you, so I don't really connect to any sense of godliness. But I do, in my life, in my professional life, and in my personal life, connect to the notions of beauty and what is beauty and love. Those ideas seem to me to be very close to the idea of what soul is.
Yeah. Well, Monty, you answered the question with the question, so you won. We're done. That's it. that's what Irish people do.
This is not the old Cherry Fialka that I remember.
You have a little Irish blood?
I do, actually.
Yeah, because the Irish go, hey, you Irish answer questions with questions, and they go, we do, eh?
That's right.
Okay, second.
I do love the Irish. One of my favorite poets of all time is an Irishman.
Who's that?
Yeats. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, Jerry. The falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center will not hold. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned.
I mean, what's the name of the poem?
It's the Second Coming.
Wow.
It ends with, and what rough beast its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born.
Oh, yeah, that's Joan Didion right there. That's
man.
And then doesn't Yeats ask the question, can you tell the dance from the dancer? Anyways,
I don't know.
One of those great poets say that. So here's the second Turing question. Can machines think?
Sorry?
The second Turing question is, can machines think?
Oh. Much as the world of science and, with all its algorithms and, and people like DiMaggio who are trying to apply what they've learned about human neuroscience, the principles of neuroscience, to robotics. They're trying to do that. I don't think so, Jerry. I think not.
Yeah. Okay.
And may never be until we are able to create a human being.
Yeah. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Oh, that's a damn good question. Again, kind of an unfair question because it's a combination. The answer is both. But I would have to say that I start with meaning, and the meaning proceeds to happiness, and understanding proceeds to happiness.
Yeah, that's good. This one woman I interviewed, she goes, that's a trick question. I said, all my questions are trick. They're all
right.
Trick. What do you mean?
I remember Haskell Wexler getting a little confused every once in a while, which was very good, Jerry. Yeah, By the way, Jerry, he said that was one of the best interviews he'd ever had. I just want you to know that.
I appreciate that. We got to talk more about that in the future. But it's fun because your answer was right, and there's no right or wrong answers to any of my questions. But Monty, that one you got right because I got it from Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. And he said, happiness ends, but meaning can last. Now, of course, there's a lot of variations there, but if you're pursuing meaning, it's going to be, whatever, blah, blah. So that's
a good book. I love that book. I haven't read it in probably a decade, but every once in a while I pick it up. I love it.
It's important. So does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we creating it?
Yeah, I think consciousness is there. But I think that we again, another one of your trick questions, Jerry. It's like, there's many answers to the question, and both words work. So, anyhow.
Yeah, both words work. That is a good. That's like, what's a word's worth? Oh, about a pound. What is faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Speed of thought.
Dude, again, you got that one right. Monty, go.
Okay. Not that particular thought, though, Jerry. I just want you to know that. It's a lot slower than the speed of light.
No, everybody says speed of light. It's like, come on. But there is no. Okay, Audre Lorde, great poet, said, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded to her and said, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest? Now, let me just tell you, when I set up a question with a cute quote, it doesn't mean you have to apply the quote, but you can if you want. So sometimes people go, you mean what new tool do I suggest to dismantle the master's house? Just so you're clear, you put the questions into the context you want. So if you want to apply it to dismantle the new house, to dismantle the master's house, that's fine. If you just want to say, what new tool do you suggest? That's fine too.
The quote is confusing me. What new? Just give me the quote again, Jerry, please.
The first part is Audre Lorde. She says, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. And then Yvonne Rainer says, you can if you expose the tools. And then I say, what new tool do you suggest?
Oh, that's a good one too. These little mind games. Well, I'm just going to throw this out there, Jerry, because it just popped into my mind, and I don't know. We probably have to have a discussion to support it, but I would just say compassion.
Yeah, that's good. I appreciate that. Someone said intuition once. Well, compassion and intuition aren't necessarily new, but we could use them newly. It's like we need some compassion here. That's a great answer, dude.
Well, you've got the master servant thing going on in your question, and we don't have a master really if we have a master with compassion. We've got a friend, right? So
Yeah.
anyhow, that's where my mind's.
It's amazing because there's a phenomenon down south when these rich white kids are raised, or not even down south, when the rich white kids raised by a black nanny, that's their hero in life, and they teach them jazz and blues, and it's like, I'm cool because of my black nanny. So it's like, what in a relationship? How did white American kids get hip? Because their parents were smart to hire a black nanny. Now, of course, it sounds racist or whatever, but it isn't a complex thing how much slave owners did love their slaves in a way. I'm not saying, it's horrible, but it is a funny phenomenon,
Yeah.
So
But then the world changed when they started listening to the blues, when they really started listening to the blues. That changes everything.
Yeah. Okay, McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions. So we don't know what cell phones do to us, really. We use them as services and disservices, but we don't really know how transistor radio changed us or how cars changed us. We just embrace them. So McLuhan's main question, and Pound would say, we can look to the artists to expose and reveal the hidden psychic effects so that we can cope with what we don't like about them. And so, isn't that funny? So then, that is really beautiful. And so McLuhan's one of his main probes was, why do we, and it's the question I'm asking you, why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists reveal them to us?
Why do we ignore them?
Yeah.
Well, I would answer that question by saying it depends on how good the artist is. And if the
I never had that answer. That's a good answer.
And Jerry, with that, I'm going to leave you with a little fragment of Ezra Pound. How does that sound?
Good.
Have you heard of this in a station of the metro?
Go.
The apparition of those faces in the crowd, petals on a wet black bough.
Wow. What's it mean to you?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's a haiku, so it's the meter of a haiku, the same number of, beats as in a haiku. But it starts in a station of the metro, so you're in Paris, and then you're in Paris, you're in the subway, and there's thousands of people, and it is the apparition of those faces in the crowd. That's all of those faces that you will never see again because it's all evanescent, in the same way that the cherry blossoms are evanescent in Japanese culture, because they go and watch the cherry blossoms as they fall in a full moon. That's a ritual of Japanese culture that Ezra Pound knew about. So that's what he was writing about, but he applied it to this experience of being in the metro in Paris.
Dude, you are, man, forget film. We're talking poetry. That is heavy because we're going to get into poetry a lot deeper, but it was funny flip because I asked you, what does that mean? Because T.S. Eliot again said, poetry can communicate before it's understood. I'm so literate. So literate. I wanted you to tell me, break down how these words communicate something that's communicate in a better way, because Robert Frost was asked, what does that poem mean? Just like I asked you, well, tell me what that poem means. Robert Frost said, tell us what your poem means. And he goes, you mean you want me to say it worse?
Exactly.
Isn't that amazing?
Oh yeah, it's beautiful, Jerry. It's beautiful. What was the quote again? Give me that quote again, because I'd like to remember that one about
poetry can communicate before it's understood.
Yeah, can communicate before, because we've been touching on that all the way through our whole discussion. That emotion, and the emotion that's evoked by art, is what we feel first before we understand what we're feeling, right?
Yeah.
And if a good artist, like what we just to go back to the last question, if an artist is really powerful, you're going to remember what he's talking about, and you're going to apply that to machinery or whatever it is that whatever this invention is that they're trying to help us to understand.
Yeah. No, it's really good. And I will reverberate back to poetry, but I have to tell you this one, which Richard Modiani taught me when he was director of Beyond Baroque Poetry Center, where we did events together, the oldest poetry center in the world. Bravo to them.
Yeah.
They spawned the great Amanda who knocked him dead at Biden's inauguration. She came out of Beyond Baroque.
That's so fantastic, Jerry.
Yeah.
That's just
And
fantastic.
So
Yeah.
here's what Richard told me. Gary Snyder said,
Hmm.
the task of the poet is to see the world without language, then put that seeing into language.
Damn.
That's
same thing, man. Beautiful.
That's it. That's
Beautiful.
cinema right there. You know, we don't need no stinking words. Although the history of cinema is just filming plays, they never really took advantage of it. Peter Greenaway said, cinema is much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers, you know.
So, that's not fair. That's not fair. Because, look, you know, it depends. Maybe Greenaway was talking about storytelling with words rather than storytelling with images.
Yeah.
But storytelling, do you know about wayfinding, Jerry? Do you know what wayfinding? You know how the Inuit Eskimos
spell a word way. How do you spell it?
Way, W-A-Y, wayfinding.
Oh, wayfinding. Okay.
Like for example, the way the Aboriginals get through the desert, you know, without a map, right? They find their way, they sing their way from one point to another, recognizing the landscape through the music.
Wow.
And the Inuit wayfind also with stories, but they can wayfind hundreds of miles through a whiteout in the wintertime, man.
They don't need no GPS.
They don't need no GPS, dude. No stars, no nothing. They can find no stars. They find the dot in the whiteout, Jerry, and they don't miss by a foot. I'm not kidding you.
Amazing.
Isn't that unbelievable?
Is this an anthropological term? Wayfinding?
Wayfinding, yes, it is. Yeah.
Dude, here's the total.
If you want to catch up on it, Jared, there's a great book called Wayfinding by a woman named Connor. I think it's either Connor or O'Connor. And it's a recent publication. I just read about it in New York Times Review of Books, and I bought it immediately and read it. Because wayfinding, filmmakers are wayfinders.
Oh, yeah.
Storytellers are wayfinders.
Yeah.
We're wayfinding our way into the future, Jerry.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing with stories.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
well, that's two evokes there. Perfect. This writer, successful writer, said her mom was raised in an island where there was no books. She never read, but she knew how to handle a tsunami because one of the songs she would sing told her what to do.
Unbelievable.
So you don't need no stinking book or sign. You know, you live in an area. They go, what to do when there's a tsunami? Have you seen any of these signs in our area? It's like,
of course.
Watch the dogs run up to Mar Vista.
Get the hell out of there as fast as you can. I know.
But here's the funny one, Monty. McLuhan has this joke where the explorer's going through the woods with his assistant, you know, what do you call it, a indigenous guide or whatever.
Yeah.
And in the explorer, the white explorer goes, I think we're lost, and the guide goes, we not lost, teepee lost.
Teepee is lost.
Like the tent, the campsite is lost. We're not lost, the campsite's lost.
Yeah, I know. It reminds me of a story of, you know, this guy wandering through the desert in, you know, the outback in Australia with a shaman, and he's trying to find his way with a map and gets lost, and they turn to the shaman says, we're never lost.
Yeah, that's it. Same thing. We are never lost. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. That's good. Okay, so
oh, Jerry, One quick story about GPS, which I think you'll love, is
Please.
that they have discovered that Baffin Island and Greenland are completely covered with markers. They've gotten this information from Inuit shamans, with markers that have stories that are all over, like Baffin Island, and Google Maps is going to start to map Greenland and Baffin Island according to those markers, which are ancient, thousands of years old markers for wayfinding. So the Eskimo, that's how they get themselves, through the whiteout. Anyhow, I thought you'd be amused by that.
That's not only amusing, that shows you they're an advanced company, because you're going to tap into what's the elders have done the research, tap into it.
That's right, exactly.
Okay, Monty, what do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Oh, Jerry, Jesus.
Jesus?
Jerry, what do I worry about? Oh my God, there's so much to worry about these days.
Just
Jerry.
one
thing. Oh, I don't want to state the obvious. I'm worried about fascism.
Good. Okay, let's move on. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's enough said.
No, we'll get back around, because I want to get through a lot, and it's good. I encourage these tangents in storytelling and anecdotes. That helps flesh it out. So,
good.
But are you more afraid of old ideas or more afraid of new ideas?
I'm not afraid of either. Some old ideas are still with us and wonderful, and some new ideas have yet to be invented, of course, but will also be wonderful. And we're surrounded by new ideas, which I love.
Yeah. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever, or one of them?
Yes. The mind is flooded, Jerry.
Dude,
I'm trying to find the oldest one.
Monty, you got to realize the most beautiful parts of these sessions is when the person is willing to not talk and think. I'm telling you, or whatever you're doing, feeling or thinking. The beauty is the silence, because all we're doing is yapping away. And there's, if anyone's watching this, they're like, that's where we get them swooped in.
Yeah.
The podcast name, man, love a Brazilian. Okay, go ahead.
I would have to say I grew up in the country in Ontario, close to Lake Ontario, and the storms would blow off the lake during the wintertime. And when I was a little kid, my father had not yet completely winterized this house. It was a summer cottage that hadn't been winterized. And the storm would blow up through the floorboards, there's like sometimes even bits of snow, and we had a space heater and a fireplace. And my earliest memories are in front of that fireplace with my, with the dog and the cat and my sister and my mom and dad, in the warmth, the absolutely lovely family warmth.
Dude, that is amazing metaphor, because it's literal and metaphorical. Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Memory is a blessing. And I'm here to tell you this as I get older, Jerry.
What were we just talking about?
Exactly.
James Joyce said, "Remember to forget." Wise words.
That's wonderful too. That's a wonderful quote. So, okay. No, go ahead, man.
Tell me, within your immediate family, just briefly, and then outside your immediate family, one role model, one person who had an impact on you, and what specifically was that impact?
In my family?
It's in your immediate family and then outside your immediate family. Just
in my immediate family, my father had a huge impact on me. He was excuse me?
What did you get from your dad mainly?
Well, my dad was a designer, Jerry. He had a lot of strong artistic elements in his personality. surrounded himself with artist friends, and they all gathered around this same fireplace, many times, and so that I grew up in that, I would say, charmed environment because of my father and my mom too, but it was more directed by my father, and I was influenced deeply by my father. In that, my father was also a voracious reader. I loved to read. My father was, loved philosophy particularly, and we had a lot of interesting discussions, Jerry. And they were very influential. But also, I think the primary influence in my dad was his love of nature.
Wow.
And he really imparted that to me. Thank God.
That is beautiful. Now, outside your immediate family,
Yeah.
early role model, early impact. Yeah.
Yeah. My mom comes from an Italian family, and old Italian, Venetian Italian, and her mother's brother was a composer, Italian composer, and he also had his personality had a huge impact on me. And it was almost entirely anecdotal, because I knew him very little, but he composed opera, and he was from Venice. He was a pure Venetian. His stuff was performed at the Fenice, his operas, and he founded the Bach Festival in Carmel. And he was a very accomplished artist, and also powerfully strong member of his community, and contributed a lot to the world around him.
Beautiful. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
No, let's put it this way. My mom was raised as a Catholic. She's a Catholic Italian, but she was actually a Baha'i.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, and so I saw the writings of Baha'u'llah, when I was growing, little guy, and Khalil Gibran, the Prophet, those books, and they influenced me. That influenced me a lot. But my mom eventually left the Baha'i faith, and my father eventually became an agnostic. They were both Baha'is, and they met in the Baha'i faith. So anyhow, that's
cool. Do you pray?
I meditate.
Yeah.
A lot. It's more and more helpful in my life.
If God exists, Monty, what do you want God to say to you after you die?
That's an incredible question too. If he was to say something to me after I died, well, maybe it would just be, well, thank you for trying as hard as you did.
Oh, that is beautiful. Not like, dude, do a rack focus on this shot.
Exactly. And get the timing right. And make sure that it's seamless. Nobody will notice the camera work, Jerry.
Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
I don't believe in evil. So I don't believe either is the case. Yeah. I think that we, as human beings, we can go wrong, but it's our responsibility to help each other. Yeah. So if we find somebody who's really, fucking up over and over and over again, we need to help that guy. We need to reach out and help those people. They didn't come from nowhere. The problem didn't come from nowhere. Some guy's beating his child. He was probably abused as a child by his, so there's these things that all have a reason, and there's a lot. We have lost that, Jerry. There's way too many people in tents on Venice Boulevard, man. We have lost this ability to be compassionate with one another. Yeah. We just drive by, we're on our freaking cell phone, or, we're listening to something, or, we're not seeing. We don't see what we need to be seen and feel. We're not feeling our fellow man.
Yeah. I'll tell you.
Can
I'll
you
tell
do
you.
that, Jerry, easily, Jerry? Can you just drive by
No,
a homeless
I'll give you an
guy?
example of my observation of what you just talked about, because I
Yeah,
have a lot of my friends are homeless, and I talk to them, and
yeah,
like
yeah,
Michael Ventura said it best, the best thing you can do to a homeless person is look them in the eyes.
yes.
It's amazing.
Acknowledge
No,
that
it
they're
goes back to
there.
your compassion thing. But I spent half my life on the corner of Venice and Lincoln waiting for the light to change on my bike.
Yeah,
So I'm a little more observant of the billboard in
yeah,
people's faces and not
yeah,
like, "Ugh." And
yeah,
so the homeless guy, stinky and smelly on the curb, is the only person who has a smile.
yeah,
Everybody in their cars are like, "Ugh."
yeah,
And Ted is like, "What's
yeah,
right with this picture?" That,
yeah, man.
it's an amazing phenomenon, but
That is so true what you just said, Jerry. In fact, I'm going to relate a little tiny anecdote to you, just so you
please.
get another vibe on who the hell I am. When I came here from Canada, I moved to Los Angeles like almost 40 years ago, right? And I'm with driving around the city, and I would go to work, and people would ask me, Monty, why are you smiling all the time? Why are you laughing all the time? Damn, man, I enjoy what I do. I love my life. And so I'm driving down. It was actually on Pacific, in Venice. I'm driving down Pacific, and this is like I've been in LA for 2 years, and then one day I had this like you're just talking about a kind of epiphany. I'm watching the faces go by in the other cars, right, going in the opposite direction, and they're all grimacing, Jerry. Every single one. They're like, it's like, what is going on? I was like, Monty, if you ever get to that stage, it's time to go back home.
Wow, heavy. That's beautiful.
I'm not quite there yet, Jerry, but I've
Yeah.
been close.
Well, another Joyce thing, he said, we can find epiphanies in everydayness.
Mhm.
You don't have to, anyways.
No, but Jerry, that is actually another thing that my father taught me, that there is beauty, astounding beauty in the tiniest things,
Exactly.
right? So, anyhow,
You just got to keep your eyes. So, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? This one I'm going to set up with a few modern thinkers' thoughts. Alan
sure.
Watts said, "If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them." Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais. Keep your friends close and your enemies close. Keep your friends, keep your keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Yeah.
JFK said, "Forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name." And Fellini says, "I need an enemy." So it's a lot of thoughts.
Really? Those are beautiful, all
Yeah,
of them.
it's a lot of thoughts. The
Mm.
the basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you specifically react to the Alan Watts, Monty? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Mm. No, I again, I'm not sure that is Alan Watts, because I would have thought Alan Watts would have said, if you understand who your enemy is, you should have compassion for him,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, I remember reading a little passage in a wonderful book, Jared, which I highly recommend to your audience, to anybody, anybody. It's kind of a Bible of mine. It's called Ethics for the New Millennium, and it's by the Dalai Lama. And in that, he relates a little tiny anecdote which just blew my mind and stayed with me from the first time I read it. And that was about a monk that had been captured by the Chinese, a friend of his, a Rinpoche. The guy had been captured and tortured for years. And then finally he escaped and he came to visit the Dalai Lama. And he and the Dalai Lama had a conversation. And the Dalai Lama said to him, you don't look at days different than you did before you were captured by the Chinese. What's that about? And the guy, he said, well, I didn't allow anything to impact me. The only thing I really worried about was that I would lose respect for my captors.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now that is heavy, man.
Oh, that's totally heavy. You can't, you don't want to become your enemy. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. I appreciate what you just said. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin over 100 years ago. Well, no, now I've been corrected. They said he was the business manager of the Volta Cinema. So whatever.
Oh yeah, James
Yeah.
Joyce was. I didn't
Yeah.
know that. That's
Volta
cool to
Cinema.
know.
He ran a movie theater, and he basically checked out. He said, "This is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?"
Well, again, that's talking about art and the function of art. And I mean, in my experience, Jared, that is the glue that brings us together. And I spend my whole life, it's a form of theater, filmmaking. We take theater and we turn it into cinema, but the idea is that we're creating as powerful a way as we can for people to enter the story and to relate to the characters that we've created, to connect. So in the movie theater, people come out of movie theaters and they're like, if it's a good movie, they're transformed. They're transfixed. It's a worthy art form, and theater too. I love theater.
Yeah, especially being a cinematographer, you'll love this one. Buñuel said, "If you come out of a movie theater and go, the cinematography was great, the filmmaker failed."
Yeah, well,
it's a great statement, but it's not totally true because Monty did some great camera operating on that film, but the film still could have transformed you, enlightened you, but we have aesthetic. But he's saying you're supposed to be swooped in to the film so much that you don't even notice that there's anything happening.
Well, Jerry, I'm sorry if I'm going to fill your brain with this kind of stuff in this interview, but they say that film is the first and the most powerful art form that we have ever designed, because it's the closest to imitating the way the mind works. Right. Yeah. So when you go in a movie theater and it goes dark and you see the audience and you hear the audience for a while, and then that rectangle of light enters into your eyes and into your perception, and it's in there. Right. That experience, if you're really doing it beautifully, that experience you're hitting the truth with your cut, with your storytelling, with your performances, with the music. All of those elements are coming together and adding up to a total, that's greater than the sum, right? And people are overwhelmed by that. Even I, make a film and I'm shooting it, and then after it's over, I don't know, Jerry, if it's going to have power or not.
Yeah.
Right. But then you go to the theater and it's one of those movies where all of those things are coming together beautifully. Knocks your socks off, right?
Exactly. So perfect lead in. A question I often avoid. McLuhan said there's no such thing as a good or bad movie. It's a good or bad viewing experience. Any comment?
Yeah. The good or bad viewing experience has to do with how, faithfully the filmmakers have told the story, how close to the truth they've gotten, right? Then it's a good viewing experience, right?
Dude, you really handled that one well. Okay, because most people are film is they're like, no, I've seen bad movies. There's bad movies. It's like, yeah. That's why Timmy Burton made a film about the worst Hollywood director ever. It's like, yeah, you can still have a good time at a bad film.
Oh, that movie was wonderful. That's one of his best movies, man. What's the name of that movie, Jerry? I forget.
Ed Wood, I think.
Ed Wood. Yeah, that was fab.
Okay, so now we're on film. What first attracted you? Just walk us through to making films, to being a film careerist. You're going to school. Your parents are teaching you the arts and reading. Were you watching films at movie theaters and go, I want to do that? Like where was the crossover point? Like,
I started first. I started with still photography, and I had a friend of my mom and dad's gave me this beautiful old Hasselblad, the first generation of Hasselblads. It had like this focal plane shutter that go, it's like now the shutter's in the lens, right? Everything is much more sophisticated, but the glass was still beautiful, Jerry. And the camera functioned 2.25, 2.25. So my dad, as I mentioned to you before, I was surrounded by art growing up, and not photography, by the way, but painting and film and sculpture. Anyhow, so I took this camera and I started to play with it, and it took me to. I was already going to museums and looking at painting. I collect art books now. I just that whole world became my world. The frame, the composition, color, the stories that were being told. So I fell in love with that first as an art form, still photography, fine art, still photography. Then I really embraced that. And then, it was that I was growing up in my teens in the era of repertory cinema. So I started going to repertory cinema constantly, and I just fell in love with it. I'd go like a week of Italian neorealists, like a week of Bergman, all of these great, week of the French New Wave, it's like, that just totally fell in love with it, Jerry. And I knew from the time I was about 14 that I wanted to make films.
Super good answer, dude. And then this is a question I never asked, but I love it. How'd you form your framing aesthetic? Because you're a filmmaker, but a
Yeah.
lot of your career has been camera operator and cinematographer.
That's
So
right.
you do this, and you're a pro at it. Now,
Yeah.
this is like, we're in what ratio are we right now? We're each in a little ratio, and then the box that
We're in
contains
1:3:3. Right now, the box that we're in right now it's
pretty
don't
close to
know.
1, 2, 3. But I'm
I think
saying,
it's 1:3:3. Yeah.
Zoom is an amazing phenomenon because
Yeah.
it's always the face is pretty much center. But like I sort of sit back and I'm not so centered. But I'm saying you actually framing it like, you're
Yeah.
not framing me like that.
That's
And
right.
that's called the framing. How did you form your framing aesthetic?
Okay. Well, that's a very interesting question because there are framing aesthetics that go with certain kinds of storytelling. So, with genres of films if you are making a thriller, for example, like the movie I did, Single White Female, if Luciano Tovoli was the director of photography, shot shot for Antonioni, was a great cameraman, and taught me more about framing, lighting, composition, and general filmmaking, editing, how to create a master, all the than any director I have ever worked with, ever. So we were working with Barbet Schroeder. Barbet would go to Luciano and say, Luciano, is this scene covered? Do we have everything? And I'll tell you a quick anecdote, Jerry, make you laugh. Second week I'm working on that movie, and I didn't know Luciano very well at all, but I'd already fallen in love with him. An Italian master. It was like, I just died and gone to heaven. And so we finished shooting a scene. I'll get back to the framing because framing is a huge subject for me. But we just finished shooting a scene which involved a elaborate master, and some close-ups, and we were done. And Barbet went over to Luciano and said, Luciano, do you think that we need any coverage? And Luciano said, no, Barbet, no, we're finished. And he stomped away and he said, Monty, come here. So I go right over to him. Like, I'm working right between these two guys, right? I have to understand both of them, right? And he says, Monty, coverage is garbage. Coverage is garbage. I'm like, what's he talking about? He said, Barbet knows nothing. I'm like, what? This art director. Come on. And I've seen some of his movies. They're pretty good. Then, okay, who do I believe here? What direction do I take? But he said, what he meant, and I understood this later, and very, very, very quickly with Luciano, is that, he learned from Antonioni filmmaking. And Antonioni was an extremely careful filmmaker. So his philosophy was that if you give the editor too much, he's going to use it, right? And you won't get the story that you need to be told, that you're trying to tell.
Really great. Don't give the editor too much.
That's right.
That's why digital editing ruined cinema, or it changed it. But that was really good. But I'm curious.
Okay, so framing,
really
Jerry.
great anecdote, but I'm curious.
Yeah.
In you tell me, but I can suggest where I think you got your framing aesthetic, but you tell me.
No, you I don't think you could guess.
Okay.
But with Luciano, for example, in that movie had two distinctive framing aesthetics that I followed religiously. The first third or half of the film was a kind of external storytelling, right? Where we would shoot proscenium, we would shoot tableaus. The camera would be at the correct height to be level, to make the architecture parallel to the frame line, right? Now within that, of course, there are framing, let's say framing rules is the wrong word, but there are framing aesthetics for the different sizes of the frame.
Yeah.
So if you're shooting a 27 mil master of a room where there's action taking place in the room, and you want to hold the figures from head to toe and maybe have some headroom that gives the atmosphere of that scene, then you don't want to be suddenly clipping the feet, because then the audience, it's subconsciously confusing to the audience. Just in some cases, you do want to consciously clip the feet, so you do confuse the audience, right? So there's all of that. There's rules and rules to be broken in knowing when and how to do that. So the first half of Single White Female was this and the light corresponded to that kind of framing. It was sort of sunny and bright, and you didn't really get into the emotion, the thriller, psychological thriller part of the story. Then when started happening, we started pushing in closer on wider lenses, dropping the lenses, right, to distort the room. The room was no longer a graphic parallel to the frame line. It had become distorted, and that became more and more the language of that second half of the film, because we were starting to reach for psychological states of mind rather than showing this sort of day-to-day activity externally. So there's two completely different framing aesthetics within one movie, right? Philosophy of framing. Now, if you're shooting comedies, you're going to shoot almost everything as proscenium shooting. You're shooting back, you're wide, you're parallel, you're allowing for the body language to unfold. Like I did 3 movies with Harold Ramis, and I loved Harold as a director. I loved Harold as a human being. Harold, Harold was one of the gentlest, sweetest human beings that I ever met in my life, and that came in his set. He never had an argument with people. I never witnessed it. And I went to him one day and I said, Harold, how do you do that, man? I mean, how do you get through a whole movie with stress-free zone? And he said, Monty, it's personal Aikido. I was training in Aikido at the time. And he said, it's a personal Aikido. I bring the person's energy if it's negative, I bring it towards me, and then I deflect it and let them, gently come to their senses. But anyhow, it was a very, very lovely guy. So comedy has a different kind of aesthetic, framing aesthetic. Also, you can center frame in comedies if you want to. I like to be much more extreme in my framing. I like to, I especially love shooting anamorphic, which is a one proportion down and 2.4 proportion across. It's widescreen, right? So, and anamorphic I love also because it has a shallow depth of field. So you can play composition, framing, to allow a whole section of the frame to be seen, intentionally to be seen, where the face is here in close-up. The rest of the frame is, I can do it on Zoom here to show people. How do we do this? I can't do it anyhow. Yeah. So there's the head is in one part, 1/3 of the frame on the right-hand side, and the rest of the frame is open, and open for me and for the cinematographer to light and for me to compose in, which I always did. But even in 185, there's still that way that you can work with framing to generate meaning in story and to be faithful to the content of the scene that you're shooting. Anyhow, Jared, sorry if that was
money. That was good. We should
You're
we'll do a whole Zoom on it sometime. But
yeah.
here's what Bruce Bailey, the experimental filmmaker,
Yeah.
pioneer, said. Where'd you get your framing aesthetic? He said, Cocteau said, I got it from the way they put the knife and fork on the table.
Yeah.
Placemat. And I would say I'm not saying you, but we generally get our framing aesthetic from the history of paintings and photography.
Oh, sure.
And then Robert Frank comes along and frames it like this.
Sure.
I mean, would you agree that's where you got your framing aesthetic, from painting and photography?
I always referred to it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, always. But I also get it from a lot of other filmmakers. Some of my favorite filmmakers, Japanese film. I love the way they compose, and so I go back and I have a whole raft of films that I like to recommend to people to see, that are reference films for me. Sometimes I take films on location if I'm doing a particular kind of story, and just turn them on at night and turn off the sound.
Yeah,
and just
it's good.
Anyhow.
Yeah. Because you really, I mean, of all people to ask, where'd you get your framing aesthetic? You've got it you've got it on site for 40 years. That's helped it. But previous to that, no, don't be sorry. This is good. Now, a screenwriting teacher told me great film is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great film is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process?
Yeah, well, intention is very, very important. In my creative process, I always, unlike Kubrick, I think, I'm not terribly fond of Kubrick as a filmmaker, but I like Dr. Strangelove. But my first inspiration always comes from the performance. The screenplay has to be good. The writing has to be there. But when you first sit down on a set and you see the actors come in, they're in wardrobe, they've got all the props are in place. It's the first time they take command of the space. And the way they move, the way they see the space, they own it. That's the way I am inspired to set up a shot and cover the scene and turn it into cinema.
Heavy duty, dude. We got to make a feature film together. I just got the guy. We're all ready, man. We're there.
Okay, I got to tell you something too, Jerry, about your world, and that's the world of experimental film. I love to go into the world of experimental film every once, just to see, oh, that's cool. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. How did they get that? I love that. So I don't close my eyes to anything in the world.
That's good. It's like, how did they get that? They just went in their backyard and put the camera out of focus and went around in their garden.
Jammed it in the ground. That's right. Put the actors
Okay. Now, Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your audience when you're making your film?
Well, that's a great question. And I'm sorry that I didn't really answer the question about intent properly, but I can answer both of those questions at the same time. Intent for me comes from that rehearsal that I was speaking of before. I see the intention of the actors, and that directs my intention. And I try to create a master that will flow and allow that intention to become present.
Beautiful. No, that's well done. And then how much, like, even in making your own docs and your own films, as well as your other work, how much are you thinking of your audience when you're making your film? Good laugh there, dude.
That's a great question, though,
Sounds
because
like an evil
some
science.
artists say, "Fuck the audience," some artists say, "Don't," who cares about what the audience thinks? And, I'd like again to refer to Luciano in the creation of a scene in a film that we were doing together. And he came to me and he said, Monty, in this scene, I don't care nothing about the actors. Right? I want the little frame here at the bottom right-hand corner of the frame is the head, and everything else is my canvas. So for light, he wanted to light it and color it so that it would convey the intention of the scene.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question, Jerry?
Yeah, no, it is beautiful.
Okay.
Because it's combination. But I'm saying, how much are you thinking of your audience?
Yeah, in the stuff that I make.
Say one of your own docs, where you're
Sure, like the Delgado brothers. Okay, man. Look, my feeling is, okay, that's about a blues band, East LA blues band. My feeling about that particular kind of documentary that's about music, and it just so happens that I absolutely love the music that these guys make, and I appreciate all of them as musicians. So I've found that it became my responsibility, and I learned over 5 years of shooting these guys, Jerry, my responsibility to show that music with as much vitality, as much a life, as much truth as I could possibly get, and using all the little cameras and getting up on stage and little lenses and racking my own focus and doing everything like a one-man band helped a great deal to be able to achieve that for these guys. So yes, I'm thinking a great deal about the audience, hoping that the audience can appreciate the band and the music to the same level that I do, trying to capture that.
Really good. McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness. Sometimes he said human sensorium. So clothing extends our skin. Knife and fork extends our teeth. The shutter in a camera is an extension of our eyelid. What does film extend for you? What is the humanness that it extends?
Well, I guess because I'm so oriented to the visual part of cinema, my my prejudice would be, or my bias, let's say, would be that it is through the eyes, and that Jerry, ask me the question one more time. Sorry, I forgot the specifics of it.
No, that's all right. What humanness or human sensorium is extended through film?
Yeah. So the humanness is that way that we see the world, and doing the best that I can to create that visually in a story, and allow that humanness to come out on the screen.
Yeah.
I hope that answers the question.
No, that answers it fine. Michael Apted, 40 years ago, I talked to him about, he made a documentary on a Russian rock star. I says, this is right when MTV is breaking. And this is also because they see that, this rapid montage was really flourishing 40 years ago on MTV.
Yeah.
Well, most people don't know, in 1922, Abel Gance had basically invented rapid montage.
Yeah.
1922, but it flourished in 40 years ago. And Michael Apted said, because we've learned to take in information faster. Marty even said, I cut my films faster because of MTV. So I asked this with a bias. Can we literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
I think we're just brainwashed to believe that we can. I think that we have a way that we max out in our absorption of information, and I would caution anybody to think that a film is better or more powerful or more intense emotionally because it's cut faster. Because some of the most beautiful films I've ever seen in my life have some of them have very little cutting. So.
Yeah. Beautiful. Again, there's no right or wrong answers to any of these questions, Monty, but that one you got right. Is it literally possible to multitask?
It is for my wife, but not for me.
Now that's a real right answer. How many years you been married?
35.
How do you explain your longevity?
Oh, Jerry, because it's been through thick and thin, and it's like the survival. Look, the film business, as you know, is an itinerant business. We travel all the time. It's like it's a very difficult business to hold together a good marriage in, but I just attribute that to love and hard work.
Beautiful. What's the most significant difference between men and women, physical aside?
Well, again, that's addresses the issue of how much femininity as a man you're going to allow to be exposed. I happen to believe that most men are have a lot of feminine persuasion, and a lot of us have difficulty showing that. Women are more vulnerable and or seem to be. Some women would immediately respond negatively to that assertion, but including my wife, who went to Berkeley. She's not more vulnerable than anybody. But no, I think women, have a beautiful emotionality, which we as men can learn from. And so I don't know, again, if that answers your question or not, Jerry.
I did it well. What was the motive of the cave artist? Not what Herzog says or anthropologists.
I didn't like that Herzog film.
Whoa, wait, come on. He's got to say, it's just your hunch. Why do you think the motive of the cave artist?
Well, again, as all art, and I view cave art as fine and beautiful as any art that's ever been created, and it is, I think, so. Sometimes you feel like art emerges out of loneliness, out of a need to reach from one soul to another. And I really think that cave art was this, magnificent way of communicating. However, Jerry, I still think that we don't really understand yet what the significance of cave art was to the cavemen. It may have been a way of wayfinding. It may have been a way of storytelling that, we're a mile and a half from a herd of antelope and you're going to be able to live here for the next 5 years. I don't know. But,
dude, you really turned me on to a major epiphany, this wayfinding. One of my favorite answers came a couple weeks ago. The guy goes, what was the motive of the cave artist? He goes, to keep people in the cave. Like, dude, come on over to my cave. And it's like, you don't want to leave. These are like,
come see my drawings.
Yeah, I'm not going to leave, man. These are good. I always say to be able to sip grapes and cheese and crackers. That's why they invented it. What's more important, Monty? Conviction or compromise?
Conviction or compromise? Was that the second word?
Yes.
Wow. They're both very, very important, but I think compromise is more important than conviction. At least the ability, let's just leave it at that.
Grand slam, dude. There's no right or wrong answers. You got 3.
Okay.
Boom, you're out of the ballpark.
You're so kind, Jerry.
Yeah, no, I'm serious. I joke, but it's okay. You've accomplished a lot in your life. These three elements: luck, skill, and ambition. What played the biggest role, second and third?
Luck first and foremost, and anybody that in my business that thinks otherwise is fooling themselves. Um, and I think ambition last, and skill is next to luck.
Dude, you really nailed it, because the question used to be, is ambition based more on fear or joy? And everybody, fair, and then William Friedkin's book came out, and he says, in Hollywood, skill and luck have nothing to do with it. It's all ambition.
Yeah, I believe that. Coming from Friedkin, I believe that.
Yeah.
He fired people left, right, and center, Jerry.
Yeah.
He would you go on a set of Friedkin as a cinematographer, live in fear the whole time. You never knew. You never knew when you were going to get the axe. Okay. Can I tell you a quick Friedkin story? It was told to me by a guy who worked with him. Okay, this dolly grip. His name was he was Chuck Connor's son, and he was a big ass guy, just like Chuck Connor's. Very quiet guy, but a wonderful, quiet storyteller. And he told me that he was doing a shot with Friedkin. They'd set the shot up, and there were like 6 or 7 moves on the dolly. And he's the dolly grip, right? You got to raise the camera and move the dolly, and from one mark to the other. And he's got 6 or 7 of these, and he hasn't had a rehearsal, right? So he goes to Friedkin. He says, "Excuse me, Mr. Friedkin," and he's terrified, right? And he says, "Excuse me, Mr. Friedkin, but do you think we could have a rehearsal, sir?" And Friedkin turns to him and says, "Son, life is not a rehearsal. We're going to shoot this son of a bitch."
I like that.
Those are the kind of assholes you have to work with in Hollywood, Jerry.
Dude, I love Friedkin. The guy said to him once, "I hear you fired a gun once during the making of Exorcist." He goes, "Nope, that's wrong. I fired a gun more than once." Scare the shit out of the actors.
Okay. No, he was a good filmmaker. Good filmmaker. Very skilled.
T.S. Eliot said, "Poetry is outing your inner dialogue." What language is your inner dialogue in?
Feeling. The language of feeling.
Oh man, you know this all. You're doing this too much.
No, Jerry.
No, I'm serious, dude. That's beautiful. No, one of my other favorite answers was Abigail Child's great experimental filmmaker. I says, "What language is your inner dialogue in?" She goes, "I wish I knew." That's a beautiful answer in a way, isn't it? Okay, so George Manupelli started the Ann Arbor Film Festival 60 years ago. Cinema's only 130 years old. They've been showing films in this festival for half the history of the medium. It's pretty amazing. His mantra was, "Ignore yourself." Jonas Mekas, same thing. There is no self-expression. Cecil Taylor, "I'm just a vehicle, and this stuff just comes through me." It's a stupid question, but basically, is art making more self-expression, or more you're a vehicle for whatever culture or technology is dominant?
I think you're a vehicle. And I don't know if you're a vehicle for the technology, but you're a vehicle for the rest of you're a vehicle for the experience of being alive. Jerry, when I'm setting, seriously, man, when I'm looking at rehearsal, I'm in a trance, man.
Yeah.
I'm not thinking, I'm not imposing myself. I'm trying to feel the intention of the actors. And I'm leaving myself as open as possible to understand what the hell that intention is.
Yeah. Unbelievable. Beautiful. Can art making be egoless?
Not if you're Picasso. But yes, I think it can be.
Yes, you're nailing these, man. Is perception reality?
Well, I guess it's the only reality we've got, Jerry.
Yeah.
Unless there is another way we can come at that question.
Monty, you've accomplished a lot in 40 years of, creative more than 40, whatever, 5 decades of being creative. Name, just briefly, one major element that stayed the same and one major element that's changed.
Well, I guess the one element that has universally stayed the same is that, a profound reverence for the medium. And what has changed is the depth to which my skills can honor that practice, that art. And that's just changed because of ongoing experience and exposure to a ton of wonderfully creative people that taught me a lot, man.
Beautiful. Lewis Carroll said, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed? Good laugh, dude.
No, it's brilliant.
Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
Yes.
Name one.
World peace.
That's good. Sunra said it best. He said
the cooling of the planet.
Yeah.
Jesus, I get at least a half dozen before breakfast too. Trust me.
Well, Sunra says the impossible attracts me because everything possible has been done and the world didn't change. Okay, Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you've turned into a strength.
What a beautiful question. Well, I think that, insecurity, artistic insecurity, even personal insecurity, that starts out, in your youth as arrogance and condescension. You eventually learn how to use that as a sensitivity, as a vulnerability that you can work with.
Wow. Dude, you're really inspiring me. You create what you resist. This is a statement that Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed into "You are what you hate." And Joyce almost nailed it. He said, "It's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve." He's cracking up. It's good.
You are what you hate. I have to remember that. That is fucking genius.
Dude, Goldthwait actually says it in about 2 or 3 of his feature films.
You know what, Jerry? I got to take out my notebook. I have to start making notes here. I cannot, because I'll forget these things, man.
Well, no, you can play it back. This is going to go on YouTube and be.
Oh, you can. Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, okay. And here's the thing. Buñuel nailed it. He said, "Thank God I'm an atheist." So just this whole idea, what you resist persists, or what you create what you resist, or one creates what one resists. What do you think of that?
You create what you resist. What was the quote from Buñuel? What was it?
Thank God I'm an atheist.
Yeah, right. I thank the same God every day. I can't answer the question, Jerry. Sorry, man.
Don't worry, dude. You've been so good. You could say, how do you find peace of mind?
Well, it's not easy in this day and age. I can say that for anybody. But at the same time, I turn to, as I said before, I'm a really, really shitty Buddhist, but I turn to that. I turn to meditation. I really particularly like Zen, Soto Zen, very, very ultra simple, cleansing, clearing of the mind. And yeah, that's my avenue.
Beautiful, Monty. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
You got a lot of surprises coming, young man. You think you know it all? Because at 12, I thought I knew it all. At 20, I thought I knew it all. At 40, I thought I knew it all. At 68, I still think I know it all, Jerry.
Yeah, well, that's
How tragic is
you're on the right station. I'm probably wrong about everything.
that? No. No, sir. You are definitely not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Another great question. Something good that you've never had and you never want. Fame.
So the three answers I get the most are fame, money, and heroin.
Yeah.
It's pretty
I
amazing.
couldn't go to heroin, Jerry, even though I was tempted.
If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck,
I heard you. I saw this quoted somewhere. You were talking to a homeless lady or something. Oh my God.
If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
I wouldn't duck. Well, I would twist and turn, like she said. I liked her answer. It was twist and get out of there. It's like,
oh, dude, you remember?
Yeah.
The woman on the boardwalk said, "I'd take the velocity of the bag of shit and sweep my way out of the vat." And I said, "That's the Descent into the Maelstrom short story by Edgar Allan Poe."
Yeah.
He took the sailors going to his death from the broken boat. Instead of going down the whirlpool, he used it to sweep his way out.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And so Joseph Boyce, great artist, said, "Make the secrets productive." Lou Welsh, beat poet, said, "Guard the secrets, constantly reveal them." But it was Thornton Wilder in 28. Art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for 90 minutes, Monty, and I really appreciate it. Truly been enlightening.
Jerry.
I'm not insinuating you haven't answered this. What's it really all about for you?
Well, again, it filters back through everything that we've talked about, Jerry. I think what's really most important for me is finding beauty, and finding it in every aspect of my life. Finding it in my work, finding it in my family, finding it in the way I live art, and and I think that if you do live beauty, then maybe you're not a really terrible Buddhist. You're not a half bad Buddhist. At least if you approach it, Jerry, it's a constant approach. These ambitions that we have in life, the really deep ambitions, we're constantly approaching, but never really getting there. But it gets better slowly but surely.
Well, you really nailed it there, because this is a question that was basically what's behind Wells's attempt to make the other side the win and never really make it. Is the journey is more important than the destination. That's the cliche.
Yes.
Why do we have to seek a destination or even name a destination if the journey is more important?
Well, I think that seeking a destination and actually defining a destination is the ambition of a young man, and I think that the destination becomes less and less and less important as you get older and older.
Yeah.
And then you understand, the process is everything.
Yeah. Well, psychogeography and flaneur is just wander aimlessly and you'll stumble into something.
You'll get there.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay, we're almost at the end, and that's really the beginning. We're going to continue this forever, Monty. You're my hero. I was really touched by this. Thank God we reconnected in the front
man.
in the front
Beautiful.
of Beyond Baroque.
Right there, I know.
Where Curtis Harrington shot Night Tide. What an amazing, that's sacred ground. You know what
It
else?
is sacred ground, man.
Right
And you know what I was thinking, Jerry? As I just started to perceive this guy on a bicycle out of the corner of my eye, I was looking at the ground thinking I had just left my garden. Like I left the garden. I've been managing East Wind Community Garden for 10 years, and I've been there for 22. And I just decided to leave, and I'm thinking of going and gardening at Beyond Baroque. And I was looking, thinking, maybe I can set a plot up right here. And you're going to see me gardening there, Jerry.
Oh my God, I go there all the time. And you know what else sacred happened in front of there? You're going to freak. That's where Nicholas Ray shot Rebel Without a Cause with James Dean.
Are you serious?
And do you know
I'm going there for sure, man.
You know what Nick Ray did? He was the first guy ever to shoot cinema out of a helicopter.
Oh, really?
I don't need no stinking boom. Anyways, here's 5 quickie Alan Watts. So just keep your answers 3 to 5 words or whatever.
Brief. Sure.
Who started it all?
I'd only be wagering a guess, Jerry. I can't say.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Are we going to make it?
Yes.
Where do we put it?
We share it.
Who's cleaning it up?
There isn't a mess.
Wow, I never had that answer. That's Monty, you know what that is? That's total Duchamp. Duchamp said there's no solution because there's no problem.
That's right. There you go, Jerry. You read my mail, man.
It's all out of you. The last Alan Watts question, is it serious?
Yes, very serious. But it's serious with a sense of humor.
All right. Okay, two more just to close out. What's the healthiest cultural shift you see developing today?
I do see it very strongly. I see a shift to the left, left of Bernie, even, that I'm really inspired by. And there's a bunch of people in Congress that represent that shift that I think it's humanist. It's caring for your fellow man. It's getting rid of this ridiculous economic inequities that are haunting our world. And it's full of compassion, man. And there's a bunch of young people that are coming on with a lot of energy, Jerry.
Yeah.
Like they're from our time,
Yeah, it is. It's amazing. AOC.
Man.
Look at Rob's gonna put up his Bernie t-shirt.
Oh,
right?
All right. I'm Canadian.
Well,
I love Bernie.
He's Canadian too. Okay. Thank you, Rob. The last question, Monty, is what gives you the most optimism?
Those people and that vision of the world. That gives me huge optimism because I lost it there for a while, Jerry. I was really worried. And then that generation came along and they've given me hope. Thank God. Well, Obama did too, but
Yeah.
And Bernie was like fucking crazy. I love Bernie to death.
I know. And AOC, I mean, it's endless.
Damn. I mean, did you see them in Venice, Jerry?
Oh, yeah.
That was fantastic, wasn't it?
It was great. Yeah.
Yeah. Were you there, Robert?
No, I wasn't.
Okay, Rob, what do you got? You got a question?
Okay, real quick question.
Yeah.
I won't quiz you too much, but what is your responsibility?
My responsibility, that's a general question, not my responsibility.
In your work. What is it?
My work. Okay.
Yeah.
My responsibility, okay, if there's two types of work that actually three types of film work that I'm doing these days.
Okay.
My main responsibility in the films that I'm making myself is to tell the truth as much as I possibly can. And at the same time, being a longtime filmmaker, I feel a responsibility to entertain my audience, to have the audience enjoy what's not being made in a vacuum. It's being made for audiences. So that responsibility. Then a more specific responsibility as a camera operator and as a cinematographer is to be true to the emotional intention of the story, and to be able to create visuals that are true to the emotional intention of the story. So if you watch a movie one of the movies I'm most proud of, A Simple Plan, it's a Sam Raimi movie with Bill Paxton and Billy Bob Thornton. I worked very hard on that movie to try and find ways of framing, mastering scenes that Sam and I were, and the director of photography, Al Archivalo, who's a dear friend. We were really in sync in the making of that film, and with the actors, because they lead the way, always. Okay,
really good. Rob, hold on, Rob. If you got a follow up, I have one perfect follow up that I left out, and it's a new question I just asked and started asking.
We love our new questions.
Yeah. Do artists have a moral obligation?
Profound. Yes, of course. I mean, it's not, artists can't function in a vacuum. You know that, Jerry. I know you know that. So, and no matter how unorthodox their approach to the truth is, their obligation is to whatever the truth is that they have created in their world, their vision. That truth is vitally important. So morals and ethics are profoundly important.
So don't.
Oh, that leads me to just say one last thing. One day I was on a fucking airplane flying to, North Carolina to work on a film, and I hadn't read the script. And I had the script on the butt, and I'm reading from Thich Nhat Hanh, the blooming of the blossom or something, the blooming of the lotus. And in the last chapter, I'm reading it, and he's saying very simple advice: don't do things in your life that you don't believe in. Don't do those things. And then I read the freaking script, and it was a horror film, and I didn't know that I was going to go and work on a horror film. And thank God I was fired before we got to the violence.
Well, you're supposed to say thank dog, not thank God.
Thank dog, I was fired, man. We all went down, the whole, like 3/4 of the crew. We shot these. First of all, the freaking script was just simple-minded as hell. But we had shot the dramatic scenes, and I was already just dreading what was coming. I was like, I can't do it. I honestly, God, can't do it, because when you're looking at that, you're looking through the finder, and you're looking at this little 35 millimeter ground glass. It's small, it's this big. Where's this camera? It's small. It's like that. It's like 185. Anyhow, it's small. But then as you're looking at it, you get used to operating, and you've got to, your eye is going, round and around and around the frame, making sure there's no flags, no sandbags, no boom shadows. And then you're watching the damn performance at the same time, right? And you've got to give the actors headroom. You got to know where they're going to move. So they don't never move the same way twice, right? Okay, you're doing all of that. All of that information just is getting sucked into your brain, man. And that screen becomes huge. That ground glass, it's as big as your perception. And you can be, as I think, as a cameraman, if you have any sensitivity at all, you can be destroyed by seeing really ugly images. You have to really be careful. You have to really be careful. And there's been I almost turned down A Simple Plan because I thought it was too violent. I read the script. I read the Beverly Hills Library. I read the script, and I started crying. And I was like, I can't do this movie, but I need the money, but I can't do this movie, but I need the money. And I called my friend who was my boss, the director of photography, Al Archivalo. And he talked me through it. And he said, well, I've had these conversations with Sam, and this is what he's thinking about the story. And I think it's a great story. And I think it's actually wonderfully written. And I think the performances are good. I said, okay. I'll do it.
You believed
really
in it.
Touching.
I started to believe in it. Yes.
Yeah, Monty, it's a follow-up because here's the bonus question. Buñuel said, I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it. So
that's good, Jerry.
But how do you navigate that? Because you almost answered it with what you just went through.
Sure.
Well,
the thing is, Jerry, you are looking all the time. Our truth is in this art form is to take the truths that you have witnessed in the script, in the performances of the rehearsal, to take those, and your obligation or your responsibility, to get back to Robert's question, is to make sure within as much power as you can give that frame, that is the intention is there, that those other artists that you have witnessed have given you. It's a gift. Filmmaking is a sequence of gifts, man. Yeah. You get the gift from the writer, you get the gift from the actors, you get gifts from the director. It's there coming at you in every direction. You get gifts from the light, from the composition, from the camera movement. It's all, and Jerry, when you are not telling the truth. Yeah. And Sam Raimi used to look at me when we're shooting a scene, and first of all, I always keep, my second assistant have the takes that I think are the really good takes circled, so that when it goes to the editor, the really good takes are. So there's a script supervisor, as you know, Jer, on the set. They do that too, right? Well, Sam would go to the script supervisor and say, Karen, don't worry about circled takes. Don't ask me, just use Monty's. Wow. Right? Because he would come to me at the end of a scene and he'd say, Monty, is the ether in the bottle? Right? He wasn't saying, do we have a sandbag in the shot? Do we need another take, is what he was saying. Right? And he knew I was the first audience, man. I'm like dying with his image everywhere in my brain,
Yeah. So. Beautiful. Well put, Monty. Okay, I think we should wrap it up here then. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Monty, what a
Jerry,
pleasure.
thank you, man. You know how much I love you, Jerry.
Yeah, I love you too, man.
I've witnessed your process. It's a beautiful one, man.
We got to talk. I got a major motion picture we can make in about 2 minutes.
Well, I've got an interview for you with Joey Delgado coming up that you're gonna just die for, man.
I'm digging that prospect. So
here, there's their poster right there for that.
Oh, nice.
Isn't that cool?
Yes.
Yeah, man.
Delgado Brothers.
Yeah. You're in that picture. What's that?
East LA. That's it.
East LA and beautiful blues, man. Just beautiful.
The real deal.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Rob, Grant. Thank you, Monty. I love
you
guys.
Thanks, Robert.
Thank you guys.
Good
that was awesome.
You,
good meeting you.
Jerry.